Welcome back to TR7 Evolution, and today we're going to get into strut disassembly. So let's take a look at what we need. I've got my wrenches laid out, particularly these ones which are going to come in handy, and they are brake line wrenches that fit most of the way around the brake line nut. We've got standards, metrics, wire cutters for when we're dealing with cotter pin, large pliers. I always bring out a chisel so I can work my way underneath things like the cap. Small hammer, don't need a big one. A couple of screwdrivers. Very important, lubricant. Don't care what kind, this is a penetrating fluid. I've hit this stuff multiple times, which you should do as well before you take it apart, and I know I'm still going to run into trouble. Okay? Also, extremely important, manual. I happen to have the factory manuals, British Leyland manuals, for the TR7. Read up on what you're doing first. Struts are one of the few places where you can seriously hurt yourself if you don't follow the proper procedure. Okay? We also have, I'm using an impact because I'm lazy. Some half drive tools, sockets that are going to fit. I've already done one strut, so I know all the tools involved. Tags, wires, and a marker for marking. Masking tape, so when we're all done, you can cover the spindle to make sure it doesn't get marred or damaged. The other component, or tool, is a spring compressor. Do not even attempt this without a spring compressor. This is where you can get hurt. This spring is under a tremendous amount of load right now because it's compressed. Now I'm going to remove the spring compressor shortly, and we'll show you how to install it properly to remove when we get it to that point. But do not even try to remove a spring without a spring compressor. You guys may have seen the memes on social media, guys using 12 different vice grips and all kinds of other things. Don't try it. Do it right. You can rent them. They're cheap. You can buy them. Nah, not so cheap. Or if you don't want to, and this is the only one you're ever going to do, take it to a shop and have them take it apart. Okay? So I'm going to tidy up a little bit and we're going to move right into this. Okay, let's get into this. First thing we're going to remove is the brake caliper. Now, you've read up on this in the manual already, and what we need to do is remove the caliper itself, which means removing these two bolts. So, we're going to start with the brake lines themselves. So we get out our brake line wrenches, find the one that fits. Like so. Make sure it's a good, snug fit. You don't want to be mucking around. It's got to be on there right, or it's going to bite you. So get it on there snugly, and then you need to get the line to come loose. There we go. This is why you want to hit everything with penetrating fluid first, so that you can get this stuff to come off somewhat intelligently. And in this one didn't, the damn line broke. And that's what you get into when you play with old cars. So, we're going to get this one out and set it aside, because we'll have to either order a new one or get a new one made. And move up to this piece. Got the wrong one. Did so. There. Now, this one also backs onto here, which is a bit of a challenge. So we're going to get a wrench on it to hold it steady while we get it off. Now don't throw out pieces. At this point what we need to do is to save everything so that when we get back to it we can get new parts made even though this is broke. There, got the evil part there. Now we'll move on to removing the rotor itself. Now I've already had to back off these bolts because they interfered with getting the steering arm off. Keep everything together. Absolutely critical. You don't want to be losing parts. Now, a little cut. Gets that off. Now we roll her over. And we're going to get the brake rotor and hub off. So I like to use a little chisel here to sneak it underneath. Don't beat the snot out of these things. Guys bang on the tops. They do all kinds of dumb stuff. You don't need to. I use a chisel because it gets in nice and easy, and then I'll back it up with a screwdriver if I need to. Cap comes off, we set it aside, and that's where we'll put all the parts that now start coming off. So, we grab our rag, wipe things down so we can see what we're doing. You never know who's been in there before you, so now we have to unbend the cotter pin. To get it straight. Take one of our screwdrivers and the little hammer and start tapping it up. There we go. That should let us get in with the wire cutters and get it the rest of the way out. And we put that right in the cap so we do not lose the part. We then remove the washer, the serrated washer that goes over the nut and lets the cotter key do its job. Now, normally I'd use a wrench on this. This one's loose. So we'll just spin it off. Nut straight into the cap. Now we just lift. And off comes the rotor and hub. We're going to take the washer, her in there. This stuff's all got to be cleaned up. Now we're going to move these parts out of the way so we can continue doing our work. Almost forgot. Every time you take a nut or a bolt out, what I like to do is to take it and put it back in its exact position until it's time to clean them and get them ready to reinstall. This way they stay where they're supposed to be you know where they belong, and it saves you all kinds of trouble running around trying to figure out what gives later. So it's a good habit to get into to help keep you from losing stuff. The other piece that I didn't finish that I should have was getting rid of the rest of the brake line. And for that, we're going to reach around and complain, find our correct wrench, to fit on the nut on the back, and then we will spin it off. Odd. And again, I'm being lazy, so I'm going to use the impact. There we go. Get on there. Just like we talked about, we're going to take that bolt, and put it right back on the remains of the brake line, which is already torn, so we can get it back off. Put it all into our pile of parts to save. And we'll move along to the next step. Now once you have everything apart, use your tags, use your wires, use your marker, mark everything. You don't know how embarrassing it is to get well into a project and then discover you've mixed stuff up. Wastes a lot of time. This way things stay clean, neat, and ready to go back together. Okay, now we got to get the top end of this thing apart, and I don't want to mess around here. This is where you, if you're not careful, can get hurt. So let's get the spring compressor installed, and then once it's ready to go, we'll look at the rest of what we have to do. When you're doing this, different spring compressors can have different procedures. Follow the procedure that comes with the spring compressor. Again, don't mess around. This is a place where you can get hurt. This one has 4 hooks, so we make sure all 4 are firmly in place. There we go. And you can turn the strut top as you need to get you the room to do it. Or cheat like I'm about to. Don't feel like fighting with it. Get the hooks in place firmly. Now, tighten it up until it can't come off. Now it only needs to be hand tight at this point, but again, what we're doing is safety first, absolutely, in this particular instance. We're not mucking about, it's too easy to get hurt. It's one side on. Don't just use one unless that's the particular setup you have and the instructions call for it. Use 2. You want them 180 degrees apart. And again, all 4 hooks in place. And like I said, you want it 180 degrees apart, so get her in the proper position. Car projects are wonderful things, but the last thing you want to do is get hurt on something that's supposed to be bringing you pleasure. So, sorry if I sound like a nag about safety. In another life I was also a pilot where safety is everything, so I do nag. Go. Okay, and again, snug as you can get it by hand. Make sure that it's 180 degrees apart. Now, without getting in line of the spring, and while keeping your hands away as far as possible, we're going to start tightening the spring compressor. Partway on. And we move to the other side. Now you turn it. Do not get in the way of the spring at any time. In this case, I'm just going to nip over and get another extension. That one's kind of tight, so I don't want to muck with it. And this is extremely safety first. Again, don't get your hands around it. Keep clear of the spring. Oops, broke my own roll. Now that the spring is compressed and it's safely secured, we can remove the nut that secures everything. Now, don't be afraid to bang the spring. At this point, keeping back, make sure all 4 of the hooks are in place. Everything is secure, nothing's out of line. Now, and only now, do we remove the center nut. Okay. Once that nut's out of the way, we remove the top plate, set it aside. Remove the centering portion, keeping it all assembled, nut on top. There we go. Okay. Now, move this little darling back. While keeping an eye on it. Like I said, safety absolutely first on this. Now, of course, because it's been on there 30 years, it's being a pain. Actually, I guess it would be 40 years. It's being a bit of a pain coming off. So, just have to work it a little. To get it off. Make sure the washers stay in place. Set it aside. Your bump stop, and at the very bottom, bottom of the gator, which is broken over the years, not uncommon. And again, all the way through this, I am explicitly following the factory procedures, taking no risks, not messing around. Now, get the spring set aside. We'll go back and we'll remove the spring compressor the same way we put it on, loosening it a little bit at a time from each side. Bottom spring rubber. We have all our parts laid out. Now, we're going to come back and take the strut inserts out because I'm going to need to get them in the vise. We're not going to do that today. But that's basically your strut now removed, your strut disassembled, ready for removing the insert itself. I'm going to need to use a vise for this. My vise is currently messed up, so we'll come back in a day or two and tangle with that part of it. But before we leave, protect the spindle. So wipe it off, check it, make sure there's no burrs, no damage, no twist. Should have done that when you were taking it off while you were at it. And then tape it up. We don't want to damage the threads. We don't want to get any burrs or nicks in it. This is where your wheel bearing rides. So we'll cover everything up. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to tag all my parts and put them aside so that shortly when we get into cleanup we'll be able to jump on that. At the same time I'm going to clean all my tools, wipe off my workspace, get everything neat and clean. So until a little later this week, that's it from Real Builds. We'll be posting this as soon as possible and we're going to try and get this project moving a little quicker. I've had challenges with weather and a bunch of other things, but that's neither here nor there. We're going to focus on getting this done. Okay, I was going to wait for a few days to do this, but cleaning stuff up, and I had a minute, so I figured I'd have at it. We're going to remove the insert right now. Now, notice I have to get it in the vise. Notice when I put it in here, I place it so the workbench supports the bottom end. It is critical you do not damage this strut housing, okay? Now, I don't have the right size wrench for this, so I'm going to make do with a pipe wrench. We're going to get it on there. We're going to make sure everything's secure and nice and tight. And let's fun. Okay, it's starting to move. And again, this is after it was hit with penetrating oil and all the other goodies and left to sit for a couple of weeks. So make sure you use penetrating oil on everything before you get started, so that you've got a fighting chance of getting it apart with doing 0 damage. That's really important. And again, once we've got it out, all the parts are going to be saved, even if we don't think we need it. And there we have one KYB gas shock, a 363015. And we have a strut housing that's all finished. And we forgot to remove the bottom spring pads. We're going to do that. And then we're going to put the retainer back in. I don't know if we'll need it or not. Often struts come with new retainers, sometimes they don't, but we're not going to take the chance of getting caught. There we go. So that's safely back in. Now we'll put this with all the rest of our parts and get the other one done. But you've seen how to do it, so it shouldn't be a big deal for you to do the same thing. Always remember, safety first, clean up after yourself, follow the manual. That's critical. It doesn't matter about my advice. Follow what British Leyland does and exactly what they say in the manual. Be extremely cautious with spring compressors, and don't feel bad if you don't want to do it. Take it into a shop. Okay, so till the next episode, where we'll be moving into starting to clean up some other stuff. That's it from Real Builds.